Okay. So, well, thanks for giving me the opportunity to share some thoughts, some motivation, many pitfalls, and some of our related experience during lipidomics. I work in a clinical chemistry department in Hospital Ramón y Cajal in Madrid. So, in 2012, I was after attending a lipidomic course in Swansea. Some of the clinic steering committee members of the ELIs, like Harald, was there. I started to do messy things like separating class lipids by HPLC, picking the triglycerol fraction, analyze them by MALDI. One thing we showed that although we were able to get some correlation between the enzymatic measurements of triacylglycerol and the measurement we made by MALDI-MS, the accuracy of the results were not perfect. At that time, we were able only to measure no more than 10, 50 samples per week. Back in 2012 and 2021, we are still struggling to try to get the same results for triacylglycerol measurements and cholesterol measurement performed by mass spec, lipidomics, and enzymatic measurements. So, but it is not only a problem of accuracy that we observe when measuring some lipids like triacylglycerol and cholesterol in general. In a clinical chemistry laboratory, we are used to this kind of representation. Here you see which is the variability in the measurement of triacylglycerol at for three different quality controls levels throughout 6 months. And you see that usually the relative standard deviation is below 3%. And this is not what we see when we measure triacylglycerols in general and also as a class by LCMS. Here you can see that for the different triacylglycerol species that we measure, the dispersion here for this kind of triacylglycerol species is higher. It was in only 4 different batches at different weeks. And the relative standard deviation is generally above 15%. So you may say, okay, this is because you are comparing very different methodologies. You are comparing a completely automatic method for measuring triacylglycerols with an LCMS method which has a lot of different steps and many sample handling. But when we compare it with, for example, another HPLC method we use in the clinical laboratory, like, for example, measurement of vitamin A and E, if you compare the variability or reproducibility of this method over a period of 6 months, you see here that the relative standard deviation it's usually also below 10%. So this is clearly going to affect your ability to detect differences in case control studies. And needless to say, the application of any measurement in clinical chemistry in which the specification of imprecision and accuracy are fixed, for example. In the case of triacylglycerols, your decimal specification for imprecision should always be below 10%, and also your specification for accuracy. And although the accuracy is very important, this accuracy depends very much on the availability of identical lipid standards, mainly deuterated standards. We usually in lipidomics are measuring in what the lipidomic standard initiative called level 3 type of quantification. So accuracy doesn't depend too much in our hands. It depends very much on the availability of these kind of standards. So when we realized that we were wrong, we were working wrong, and that imprecision was our first host to tame, we decided to redesign our method and our workflow to cope with these problems. Our method is that we prefer LC-MS chromatography over shotgun approaches because we are very interested in the behavior of sphingolipids, especially ceramines, dihydroceramines, and related compounds, and you cannot properly separate them by shotgun approaches because the isotope N+2 of ceramines get mixed up with the dihydroceramine molecules. We also are very careful in trying to correctly identify these differences between in the retention time behavior of dihydroceramines and ceramines, which can be easily followed if you plot the migration of the different species along the chromatogram. So one fixed the undefined or LCMS, we have to deal with the problem of linearity. Between dihydroceramines and free cholesterol, there are 6 orders of magnitude. So it is necessary to fit the signal of every class and lipid species within its linear range of measurement by setting the correct dilution of the original extract and reinjecting it in the equipment. This is fundamental because is it done wrong, it is sure to going to affect our concentrations. So we did this by preparing a concentrated plasma pool that was diluted down by 5th orders of magnitude. So that way we can compare the original concentration of the extract of the normally extracted and analyzed sample with the diluted or concentrated results. And when the values are about 50% up or down, we took it as a sign of a fault in the linearity. We did it for every lipid class, every lipid species from every lipid class of our method. Okay, now we have a method, an LC methods, and the appropriate condition to measure the samples. What can we do to improve our imprecision? It is simple. You have to work like you were going to put your sign or your stamp in the results. And for this, on every batch, you have to include a calibrator, quality controls, preferably at least 2 levels of quality controls, and run your samples in the same batch. That's how it's done in a clinical chemistry laboratory. The problem is that we don't have a matrix match consensus calibrator. So for the moment, what we can do is to make our own and compare the results with the values obtained by the NIST standard reference material 1950. That's what we did. We quantify our lipids for all the classes, and as you can see, the results were more or less alike. It can be perfect, but they tell you that you are measuring quite reasonably in comparison with other comparative studies. That way, we have a calibrator with concentration for lipid species obtained by the one internal standard approach. We also make our set of quality controls. It is easy if you are in a clinical chemistry laboratory, you have plenty of plasma. You just simply pull plasma from people with a low and a high concentration of lipids, and lipid of, you can measure it by measure cholesterol and triacylglycerols, and then you mix them in different ratios to have a low, a medium, and a high concentration of this, in this case, this class of lipids. But our guess was that, as lipids were transported by lipoproteins, the other lipid species will follow the same trend. As you can see here in ceramides, the values of the quality controls also tell you the same, that you have a low, high, medium, and high quality control. Now that we have a calibrator, quality controls, and internal standards for each lipid class, we can measure our samples using a single point matrix match calibration with internal standardization. Essentially, this applies a normalization factor to every lipid species on every batch. It is not new, and it's not new, but this is how it's done in clinical chemistry. It is the normal way of doing quantification, for example, for vitamin A and E. And this approach improves very much our precision. Globally, you can see the behavior of the different samples belonging to different batches of analysis done for a period of 1 year, and you can see that using this external standard calibration approach, the results of the quality controls, low, medium, and high, pull together tightly. And even in the worst case scenario, for example, if we see the behavior of a specific lipid species, for example, the ceramide, dihydroceramide 40, you can see that here the use of the external calibration gives better results in terms of reproducibility. And globally, if you check the behavior of the different lipid classes here in the upper part, you have the normal internal standard approach and this calibration normalization, this external calibration approach, you get much better results in terms of reproducibility. Well, somehow we feel that to handle the information, we have to build a software tool to do an easy interpretation and check the quality controls and the sample results. And that's the reason for which we develop a web application called QC Tool, which is available at this web page. I don't see. Well, the web page is below. It's lipidomics.com. It's easily to find, and there's a complete user manual which tells you how to use the application. It essentially is going to ask you for 4 different files, which are easily produced. Some of them are in a skyline format, and the other one are simply CSV files. So our conclusion using this kind of workflow is that now we can combine results of experiments from plasma, liver, muscle, different tissues. We use the same approach. We also put quality controls, standard this external calibrator, when analyzing on different days. That way we can compare results between days, which was very important because sometimes you don't get the same results from one liver sample analyzed now and six months later. Now we are pretty sure that the results are going to be almost the same. Of course, we still don't have an absolute quantification for lipid spacing because we don't have a consensus reference. Is references to the standard reference material 1950, the result will be immediately translated when absolute concentration for this reference value were available. And that's all I want to share with you. I'm free now for every question you may ask.